critical mass of folks tuning in. So welcome everyone once again to the MBA program Essay Spotlight. I'm gonna quickly introduce our panelists and then we'll get into our discussion today. We have a lot of terrific questions and some amazing panelists. Before I do that, I should introduce myself. My name's Graham. I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit, and I'm gonna moderate this session. I say this every time and I feel like I should repeat it though, that I'm gonna try to get out of the way and just make sure that we hear as much as possible from our guests today because it's a really esteemed panel and they're gonna have a lot to share about their programs and their essays. So let's move on and just introduce and say hi to everyone. So up first, I'd like to welcome Donna Swinford. She's the Associate Dean for Student Recruitment and Admissions at Chicago Booth. Welcome, Donna.
Hey, Graham and everyone. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Next up, I'd like to introduce Virginie Fougea, who's the Global Director of Admissions, Financial Aid, and Scholarships for degree programs at INSEAD. Welcome, Virginie.
Thank you, Graham. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for coming back. I know you've done one of these before. It's great to see you again.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got David Simpson, also a veteran of these ClearAdmit events. David is the admissions director for MBA and Masters in Finance at London Business School. Welcome, David.
Hi, Graham. Thanks very much. Good to see you all.
Thanks for joining. And next up, we have Lauren Callio, who's the director of MBA admissions at NYU Stern. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, Graham. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today.
It's really our pleasure. And last but not least, we have Kirsten Moss, who's the Assistant Dean, MBA Admissions and Financial Aid at Stanford Graduate School of Business. Hey, Kirsten. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
Ricky moved there. Hi, welcome. Thanks for the welcome, Graham. I look forward to it today.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to dive right in. And actually, Kirsten, I want to stay with you because I want to go kind of backwards through the alphabet. So the first question is, when do you read the essays in an application? And how much time do you spend like reading a file? So just, and I'd also like to know if there are any, is it the same, like when you're looking at a file, is it done, do you do it the same way that everyone else on your team does it? Like, are there certain, rules that, that you guys follow as you review a file? So yeah, just take us through this.
There were a lot of questions in there. I think there were 3 questions in there.
Yes,
so I'll
enough.
try to catch them all. I actually look at, each of us on our team has our own preferred way of going through a file, but we see the same data. And for me, it can take anywhere, I'd say on average for us, because we have a lot of essays, as applicants maybe know if they've started, probably about a half an hour per application. So I know I spend my days, there are a few days a week where I don't have any meetings at all, and I'm just really at either home or in the office with my cup of coffee and really just focusing in. And then I think your third question is, when do I get to the essays? So that is always the unknown and the magic. Sometimes it's when I start going through someone's demographic and biological information, I'll be really curious and jump to the essays. Other times it's after I really take a full review of the resume and have looked through, the recommendations, and it's sort of the final understanding of who someone is. So the honest answer is, Graham, it just depends.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. And I think we've been doing a number of these events and it does seem like, everyone does it a little bit differently. So I want to hear from Lauren at NYU. How do you guys do it? And, again, when do you read the essays? Is there a certain order that you do this in, and how much time are you spending on an app?
Yeah, so I think similar to Kirsten, everyone on our team has their own way and their own order that they read the different pieces of the application. But yes, we're all seeing the same materials. For me, I tend to read the essays towards the end, but I go back and forth, honestly. So I sort of like to look at a resume, the actual application pieces, and then look at the essays to see how that fits into the story. And very often I will have the essays on one screen and the resume on my other screen, so I can look at what that full picture is and how the essays fit into that story. So that's how I approach it. I'm sure if you ask someone on my team, they might say differently. And then in terms of how much time we're spending on an application, it's interesting for us because we do have a few essays, but if you know any of our essays, the Pick 6, for example, is pretty visual. So that one might not take quite as much time to sort of read because it is more visual. So we're probably spending anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes on an application, again, depending on where it is in the cycle.
Okay, great. And I guess I should point out at this juncture that, and I've said this in our previous events, so some of our attendees maybe bear with me, but I think that, all of you are reading these files more than once. In fact, sometimes, 3+ times. So I just want everyone to know that if one of our panelists is saying they're spending 15 or 30 minutes, that's just one of, multiple reads that your file will receive. David, how about you? How do you do this at LBS?
There's no set method that we make our colleagues do it by, kind of find your own route. But I would tend to look at, well, first of all, we have a summary sheet. So it generates all the key points we're looking for. And second to that, the resume. And then through the application, I get to the essays. And then finally, the references. So for me, I like to know who I'm dealing with and what's your background. And then what do you want to tell us? So that's what the essay contributes there. I guess I probably spend around 20 minutes or so, depending on how hard it is, whether it's a straightforward one or I need to look up somebody's company, look up somebody's LinkedIn, or whatever I might need to do extra research. So I fully understand before making a decision. And also whether it's whether I'm doing a first read or a second read. Like today, for example, I was doing second reads, so colleagues had read it first. So I was just checking the decisions to see if they go through to interview or not. So as you mentioned, Graham, there's a couple of reads plus for every person before an interview, and the same happens later after interview.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that's actually a great distinction that, depending on the read, like where you are, if you're the first reader or the second or beyond, that might impact the time spent. I do want to say, I realize that the timing of our event today does overlap with probably when all of you are reading from round one. So I want to, again, thank all of you for making time. Or maybe you're saying, wow, this is a great distraction from going through piles and piles of files, but still, I appreciate it. Virginie, how about you? How do things work at INSEAD in terms of the reading process?
So it is a little bit similar to what has been shared already in terms of where the application form is in the process. So whether this is a first read or a second read, or if it's even after the interviews. I spend usually somewhere between half an hour and 40 minutes with including the essays and the videos, because we have the videos. And I tend to go back and forth. So I watch the video, probe something, get a piece of information, and then I go fact checking with the rest of the application form. So this is usually the method I use. I remember times where we were reading on paper. Now everything is online, and we can go scroll and up and down. So that obviously helping a lot. And it's indeed a team of admissions manager who will have read the application form. So it's not just one opinion, because that would mean probably having a little bit of bias, and we want to be very careful with any potential bias. So we have always several eyes looking at an application.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. Donna, anything, how do things work at Booth with this? How much time are you spending, and when do you look at the essays?
I think it's very similar to what everyone else has already said. We can take anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, depending on where we are in the process. If there's an interview, if we were watching a video, it all just depends. And I also think that in my reader, the essay is the last piece. So sometimes that might be the last thing just by default, but it doesn't mean that that's how I always read. We get really good with our shortcuts on our keyboards, probably with tabs and moving, because you're always going everywhere within the application, because it's like a decision tree where you have a question here, so you're looking for an answer and you're all over the place. But yeah, there's really no right answer or wrong answer.
Okay, excellent. So Donna, let's actually stay with you and move into the next sort of phase of today's event. And what we're going to do here is, as you can see, your essay questions or prompts are on screen. And by the way, for those of you who have multiple essays that don't fit on a single slide, you'll see we have multiple slides, so you can direct us where you want to go. But what I'd love for you to do here is pick one of your essays and just talk to our audience about how you came up with the question, why you ask it, what you look for when you read it, and any advice that you would give to someone who's just setting out, to put pen to paper, or I guess finger to keyboard. I don't know what we say now. But yeah, take us through one and just introduce us to it.
Sure, Graham. I will talk about essay number 2. Essay number 1, I think, is your traditional why MBA, why now, what do you want to do? But essay number 2 for us, this is now the second year that we're using this exact essay. And we decided not to change because we really like the essay. We like what we're seeing, and we like that all the essays, they don't follow a set pattern, and each one just appears to be very individual to that person. And we actually spend a lot of time coming up with our essays and word choice and how we formulate the question, because we try to align the essay to our school. And here, what we're trying to say is that we have the MBA is the full-time MBA is a full package. It's not just necessarily what you're going to get on the professional side, but you're going to have a lot of professional growth, building your network. And I like to say that we admit people, not applicants or applications, and that here we want to get to know you as a person. And I know that we sometimes will confuse people because we have a 250 word minimum instead of a maximum. And the reason why we have that is that just like the real world, when you're faced with different ideas or different issues that may come up, you're not giving guidelines on how to address those issues and ideas. So instead, we want to see how our applicants navigate without knowing how to answer the question or without much guidelines. We found that when in the past, when we've given a lot of guidelines, that then the essays all follow a set pattern or a set rhythm. And here, again, we are very happy that this essay does not. We get to learn a lot about our applicants.
So, yeah, and I think, obviously, it sounds like this is the second year in a row that you've had this, this format of it. And I know in the past it's been, there was a PowerPoint, but it's all about, like you're saying, these extra, what makes up the candidate. I think it's great. I think it's such an interesting opportunity for the applicant. The thing that I wanted to ask, and this is a really basic question, and you're going to have to forgive me because I know we talked about this recently on an episode of the podcast, but I'm very focused on this 250 word minimum. And so my first question is, where did that come from? Because most schools have, a word limit as opposed to a minimum word count. And, I also wondered, do people ever look at this and then write these, produce these things as only 250 words because they're just so used to looking and seeing a max that they, kind of don't pay attention. But I'm just wondering, where did you come up with this idea to give people kind of limitless space to express themselves on these questions?
Sure. And I think, Graham, what I did say in the podcast was that I think people give us a lot more credit than probably we deserve in coming up with this minimum. We were discussing what we wanted to have in our essay, and we were talking about how many words we wanted, and someone just threw out the idea about having a minimum instead. And we thought that's kind of interesting and kind of making it up to the applicant, allowing them to decide how they want to approach this. And it's similar to our essays that we had previous. We had, as you mentioned, a PowerPoint essay where we let people visualize or present a visual essay. And we had some people who would give us one slide, and we had some people who gave us 50. So it was all up to them, and they're using their judgment. But the 250, it's we probably I think it's closer to about 750 to 1,000 what we see where people end up.
Yeah.
I did have an applicant. We were talking. We were just talking about a previous application, and he had said that he thought that he wrote too many words, and he wanted to know if that was true. And I said, I don't want to judge you in how many words you wrote, because it's how long did it take you to get to the message.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I know for candidates who are used to like having to count their words to fit it in and are like really nervous about this is a little bit refreshing. It's kind of a different take and it sounds like it's working out well for you guys. But I appreciate you shedding light on it because I know that it's something that candidates wonder about, like how much space they really have and all that kind of thing. So appreciate it. Let's move on. Virginie, would you be willing to introduce us to one of your essay prompts? And again, we have multiple slides here, so just tell us where you want us to go. And again,
Sure.
the idea is to, tell us about where the essay came from and what you're looking for when you're reviewing it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. So indeed, we have this #1 essay that is very broad and that has been with us for a number of years now. So people do know it, and it's really the key word here is candid. Is really we want to get to know people. We want to understand who they are and their personal story. But if you want to go to the next slide with the essay #2 and 3. So these ones are a little bit different from what we used to have in the past. And the reason why we came up with those is we want people to understand the fact that it's not just about all about work. Work is important, but it's not just about work. We are also looking at the personality and obviously well-rounded personality. So people who have had experiences outside their professional experience and as well as personal interest, passions, hobbies, anything that can be interesting to share with an admissions committee and the idea behind the admissions committee is more importantly with the class, and so it's ultimately what we want to hear. What will you be ready to share with the others in the classroom in terms of experience, in terms of thought-provoking ideas, and this sort of moment where you exchange with the others. So this is the reason for those 2 questions. And more importantly is what have you learned from those? So it's not just listing an achievement or several, it's why was this important for you, is more of the reflection behind that we are trying to get out of this. And similarly with the videos as well. So we do have similar questions in the videos and in the essays. And I really like what was just shared about the minimum numbers, because we will go with the maximum. And sometimes people do ask, indeed, are you actually counting the words? No, we're not, because at the end of the day, what is really important is can you just express your ideas in a concise way. Yes, if we had all had thousands of pages, we could write a book, and that would be a totally different exercise. And this is not the purpose of the essays. Is an introduction to you, and then you can probably explain it further in the videos, and then people can also explain it further in the interviews with the alumni. So that's the idea with this.
Got it. So I want to ask a very kind of tactical question about essay 3, which is on screen here. You talk about, extra-professional activities, and you talk about, those activities that you've been involved with for a significant amount of time. And I just wondered if you would weigh in on like how should one think of that? Is like a year a significant amount of time, or like what is there something that you have in mind there? And then the other thing about this essay that I was curious to know, I mean, they're only 300 words, but I was wondering to what extent applicants talk about activities and even maybe map those activities or involvements to future involvement at INSEAD. Like if they're, saying, talking about how they're involved in A, B, and C, and maybe just a quick mention of like something at INSEAD that relates to that. Do they have space? Is that something you see happening or not?
Interesting. So by significant, we mean something that had an impact on you. So it doesn't mean to be lengthy. It can be, but it's not by the length that you can probably understand this if that was significant for you or not. So some people may have been in a team in any kind of sport for a number of years without being really involved in the logistic of it, or without being the leader of the team. So we will try to get an understanding of the level of involvement, and obviously that will influence the significance of the experience. So this is what we are trying to understand in there. Now with the future involvement in the different clubs, I think this is what you're alluding to. So the clubs that we have, or the participation in the classroom. Yes, to some extent, we can understand if somebody has already been involved in an charity or any other community work. We can probably understand that this person might be involved in the clubs, but it's a little bit different. The clubs could be sector clubs, like the consulting clubs, or the tech. And in that case, it's by having been working in that industry that people will be participating in the clubs. And similarly for the Africa or the LATAM club, this is because people are coming from that region, specific region. So I don't think this is really linked, but this is a good question, actually. Maybe people are viewing it like this, but we don't necessarily need that, to be very honest.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. I think what I've learned in asking this question is that it sounds like any outside activity that is significant to the candidate in terms of having an impact on them is sort of fair game to discuss, and that it sounds like if you probably prefer that they spend the words talking about how they've been enriched by these activities, and as opposed to trying to kind of map them to future things that they might do at INSEAD. Yeah. So that's great. That's super. Yeah.
Then people would limit themselves, and we don't want people to limit themselves, obviously.
Right. That makes excellent sense. So thanks for shedding light on that. David, let's move over to you. And this is a little bit easy for you because you guys just have the one question, I believe, right? Still one question this year. So take us through one of your essays, or this essay, and tell us where it came from and what you're looking for as you read this.
I promise this is not because we're lazy readers, although it is kind of linked to the fact we want to make it straightforward for people to apply. And as you've spotted before, Graham, it's also the fact that we have different ways of asking different questions throughout the application. For us, this is a very business-like question, isn't it? It's, business school is career focused. And so we've asked a direct, functional, career-specific question. It's about your journey, your past, your future, and where LBS falls into the middle bit about helping you to transition. Asking them this question, we believe, helps to show how well candidates understand their own career and what's been important to them so far. It fleshes out more than a resume can do. It helps us to see how realistic or ambitious your plans are, but don't worry, it's not a contract. So it really is just a sense of direction, I guess, if anything. And it also helps to show your research on the school and also on the career sector that you're talking about, as well. As it's frustrating if someone writes down what they're aiming for, but then they show no clear understanding of what that might be. It's very straightforward, though, so it's not open to many misinterpretations, which is important to us, I think. How did we decide on it? Well, after many years of considering different things, we actually decided to keep this simple. And as I said, use different elements of the application to gather the other stuff that perhaps some schools do in just the essays. So we decided not to go with sort of scenario questions. But what this does is it helps us to provide, or helps candidates to provide, talking points for a later interview. I think it's, in terms of advice, making sure you read and reread your what you're submitting and tell us everything that you believe we need to know. Remove all the superfluous stuff. So be really tough on yourself. And most importantly, write it as a reader. You know, don't put too much technical stuff in there. When you're telling us your career story, it doesn't mean we're going to understand exactly what you do in your very technical job. And relax with it as well. You know, just tell your story honestly so that we can build on it at a later point.
Excellent. I have two kind of very short follow-up questions. So the first one is, the essay piece of your application is pretty short overall. As I said earlier, you've got the one question. It's not, it's 500 words, not 1,000 or something. And so is this because, would you be willing to speak a little bit to some of the other things in your process that happen after this? I know you have there's like a video, obviously you're interviewing. Is that why you kind of feel like we can be brief here and then we'll get a lot of additional information later in the process as well?
Yeah, totally. There are different questions within the application, some supplementary questions that I guess you may describe as being mini essays. So a bit about your interests and your international experience, but we've chosen to put them in with the main application as an indicator of how much we need to hear in those sections. We don't need it to be the centerpiece, but really all of this is the basis for giving us the information we need to make the first cut decision. And then if we want to explore and take you a step further, most of that will come in person through the conversation of an interview, and that's nearly always with alumni, or the videos we ask. I know different schools do use video components. For us, only if you're invited to the interview with alum will you also be asked to submit a couple of videos, one being a standardized, everybody answers the same question, and the second one being sort of rotating from a set of 20 or so different questions. And one or two of those video questions can be quite creative as well. So that's where we get that element in. But that is further down once we get past that first cut.
Okay. And then the follow-on question I had is, I know that I heard you say, or maybe it was written somewhere, that your team gets what you need out of that main essay, and that people should think carefully about the optional essay. And so I wanted you to kind of shed light on that. Does that mean people should think carefully and come up with a way to use the optional essay, or that they should only use the optional essay if they're really need to share something else that's kind of vital to their candidacy?
Okay, so how do I answer this without giving too much away, but giving enough away for everybody that's joined us today? I would say that we will make a judgment on how you interpret the optional essay and whether you use it or not. If you haven't used it, have you missed an opportunity to tell us a little more? If you have used it, have you told us relevant information that we really need to know or would be interested to know? So this is so much open to interpretation, but we're also careful with it. We're not going to, we don't reject people because they didn't answer it. But if you tell us stuff we really didn't need to know, then that will go towards things that, are we sure you're the right fit? So it's important that you use it if you believe you have more to tell us that you didn't get the opportunity to. It can be very practical, why you decided on something or what happened at some point in your job or career. Or it might be, an opportunity for you to be quite creative and tell us a bit more. I guess some of it depends on who you are and what you've done, and whether enough shines out from your career story already, or whether you think that was quite kind of A, B, C, D, E, and you need to give us a little bit more pizzazz in the optional essay. So I'm not going to say which is right, which is wrong, because I honestly believe it all depends on you as an individual and what else you've told us in the application.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot a little bit, but I think it's good for for the candidates to hear this. And I guess what I was thinking happens sometimes when you hear candidates, they've written multiple essays for other schools, and they're like, oh, there's only one for LBS. I'm going to use that optional essay. I'm just going to paste in something I've done for another school, and I'll dress it up so that David and his team don't know that I wrote it for another school. But in reality, I'm guessing that you kind of can spot that sort of a mile away if someone's just sort of shoehorning in something that they did for a peer program.
Yeah, to some extent. I love hearing about other schools' essays, and sometimes I think, oh, we need to add this, we need to do this, but I come back for our own program that this works. We're perhaps not so cynical that we would mind too much if we thought it might have been pasted, as long as it doesn't have another school's name in it. it's more of the relevance, I think. You know, if it's saying what else do you think we need to know, and it's a really obscure piece of writing about something that we honestly don't need to know, then I might question it. So relevance is key there, more than judging on them on reusing something else.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. All right, appreciate you humoring me with some of these questions. Let's move on and hear from Lauren. Can you take us through one of the essay questions at NYU Stern? And again, we have multiple slides here with your essays on them, so just let us know where you want to go.
Sure. We are going to go right here, actually, to the change essay. So I was talking to Graham about this earlier. Which essay do I think I want to talk about? There's so many prospective student questions about the Pick 6, which you may have on the next slide if you want to pop it up quickly. If not, no problem. That's our Pick 6. We'll talk about that later, but let's go back to essay 1. This is a new essay for us this year, which is why I want to talk about this. So we call this our change essay. And this really came about through us as the admissions committee taking a step back and saying, and we really do this every year, but I think this was a pivotal year, just given the year that we've had generally in the world, and sort of saying, what are we trying to get out of these essay questions? What are we trying to understand about the applicant? And are we getting that from our current essays? And I think that we were, but I think there were some adjustments that we wanted to make. A, and B, we wanted to align this to our new branding. So about 2 years now, Stern rebranded to a change, dare it, dream it, drive it. And so we have been living that in a few different ways at the school, just in the way that we really try to be innovative at the forefront of change. We've instituted new programs, both on the undergraduate and graduate level. And we wanted to incorporate that into the application to really understand how our applicants approach change. How do they view that? And so you do have some creativity here in being able to choose any verb that you want. So we make some suggestions here for the verbs that you can choose. Feel free to choose whatever verb you want. Again, there's no wrong answer here. But what we really want to hear is how you approach change. What do you think about change? How does the tagline that you choose for yourself resonate with you? And how will you embrace and live that at Stern? So the other piece of what we're trying to understand is what has sort of motivated you to the point that you are in your journey? And how do you see that continuing at Stern? So part of this is learning how will you contribute to the community at Stern? How will this program benefit you potentially? So sometimes there is opportunity here to talk about some of that school research that you've done, to be specific about, you know, clubs that you might want to get involved with, or interactions that you've had with the community to this point. And as we're starting to read this essay, it's really interesting to see for the first time how prospective students are interpreting this. Some are taking a strictly professional approach. Some are incorporating more personal stories. Again, I don't think that there is a right or a wrong answer. What I will say is, based on the emphasis that Stern places on EQ or emotional intelligence, this is another opportunity to potentially showcase that EQ that you have and be more personal here. So you can, you know, approach it in that way as well. So there's a lot of flexibility here. So we're looking not just for that content of what you're talking about, but how you really approach change. So we want you to talk us through what that looks like for you.
Yeah, this is interesting, and it's a new, you know, as you say, it's a new essay. So I'm sure people have questions about it.
Yeah.
Thanks for shedding light. I want to go to the second one,
Yeah.
which I know you've had for a while, but it's a little bit of a curveball compared to, you know, the more traditional kind of essays that are out there. And so I just wanted to, you know, I wanted to hear more about this one. And I also wanted to ask a very specific question, which is, you know, in some respects, picking 6 images, whether they're photos, drawings, or, you know, whatever someone's going to pick, there's like an artistic element to this in some respects. And so, like, what would you say to someone who does not consider themselves to be like a great photographer or artist or even designer in terms of laying it out, et cetera? So yeah, is there anything that you can, you know, do to kind of, you know, ease the fears of those of us who are like less artistic by nature on this?
Yeah, I'll try. I'll say don't overthink it. That's like my #1 piece of advice when it comes to this essay. And it's probably the piece of the application that we get the most questions on, that applicants seem to have the most anxiety about, because there is a certain amount of creative freedom here, however you interpret that to be. So I myself am not a creative person. If I'm approaching this essay, and I have before, we have actually done this as a team where everyone on the admissions committee had to put together their own pick six. I am not the most creative person. So my pick six was literally 6 images with a tagline. And I've seen people approach this in different ways with the way that they visually lay it out, the actual images that they choose. But I think what's most important is the story that you're telling and the information that you're sharing. So for me, what I'm trying to learn from the pick six is more about who you are as a person. What motivates you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Who or what has had a really big impact on you? Those are the things that I'm trying to understand. How someone presents that can actually tell you a lot about who they are. So perhaps they are very creative and that comes out, but I've also seen, I'll give you a good example, someone who was more quantitative minded. They weren't so creative, but what they did was this person sort of said, this is my week. And they literally hour by hour calculated how much time they spend on doing all sorts of things in their week and presented it in 6 different images that way. So that was someone who had a completely different mindset and approach to it. So you can learn something about someone and how they put it together, but it doesn't have to be sort of visually, really beautiful or engaging necessarily.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that. And I'm a fan. I love this question. I think it gives candidates, a chance to do something creative and also just a chance for the admissions committee to get to know them in a sort of unique way. So very interesting. All right, let's move on. Kirsten, thanks for being really patient here. Can you walk us through one of your school's essay prompts and tell us where it came from and what you're looking for?
And do you have the other ones on the next slide, the short answer one as well?
I don't think we do actually.
Okay, great.
I think
So
we just have the main essays.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. These essays have been around for a long, long time. And I think that it was Donna who said that trying to get your essays to really link to the essence of what your school is about. So for us, our tagline's been change lives, change organizations, change the world for many years. And what we believe in that first essay, it's sort of our iconic, what matters most to you and why. We believe people who will create positive impact in the world, one of the key parts of that is understanding what you care about. And there's been lots of research. Graham knows, I think I have my PhD in organizational leadership and looked a lot at leadership assessment. And there's much research on that highly effective leaders understand what they care about and they use that energy to be the wind in their sails. When you know what you care about, then you can start to imagine what change could be and what's going to be most meaningful for you as you try to create that. So I'd say this essay encapsulates us. It's about a 650 word limit. So it's, we are trying to put some boundaries on that. And we think a lot about how many words students can have. And what's most important in this piece is for us we're not judging you on what you care about in any way. It's really the process of you having a self-awareness to think about what you care about. And it has 2 purposes. One, we get this wonderful insight into who you are and what you value. And oftentimes there's your background stories that are connected to that, things that have really touched you in your own life and made a difference. But then 2, we're trying to prepare you for when you come to campus, that you've really thought about what your anchors are and a little bit about maybe where your true north is, given what you value. So that's the first. And then the bookend, really in the second question here, is describe your aspirations. So we are a school, I think the essence of Stanford is about disruption, dreaming, innovation. So again, we're not ever judging someone on what the aspiration is, but we are looking to see, can you put that into words? Given what your values are, can you paint a picture of what you might like to do? And it'll be important for you as a leader to begin to visualize that and be able to talk about it. And that's the only way it's going to come into reality, is if you can begin by putting it into words.
So yeah, I think it's great that you're shedding light on how these 2 fit into the file and into the ethos of the the program overall. But I want to get a little tactical on the first essay and just because this is one Clear Admit once ran like an April Fool's piece about how people stay up all night pulling their hair out trying to figure out like where to begin on this, what matters most to you and why, because it's sort of a very philosophical. And are there any like exercises that you would recommend people to do as they try to sort of sift through and identify this? Or is it the sort of thing where you just think candidates, it should come immediately to them, oh, this is what matters to me, and so I'm going to write about that?
Most of our students who have been admitted on panels will talk about they have several drafts of this essay. And I'm always a big fan of, start with bullet points, start with maybe journaling a little bit, because it will come to you over time. I think there are very few people, including myself, who can wake up and know exactly what the answer is. Graham, what we tried to do this summer for the first time was something called an application boot camp, where we took whole sessions with several admissions officers and did workshop exercises. And one of the things that was really helpful was literally just breaking up in a pair with another person. And I would say to you, Graham, what matters most to you and why? And I won't make you do it right now, but you'll give me you'll give me an answer of whatever comes to your mind. Maybe you say family immediately, whatever it is.
Right.
And then we'll take a moment and ask you why again. And you'll have to write down a few sentences. And by the third or fourth time that you're forced to write, well, why is family? Well, it was my grandfather who had this big impact. He, was an immigrant. And well, why was that a big impact on you? And eventually, when you get to that fourth or fifth why, it'll start being about who you are and what you care about. So I think that's really helpful. And to do it in a pair keeps you honest, because you could, if you're not being held honest, you could cheat the exercise a little bit. And then the second thing I always start with is I try to ask applicants, what are these moments that have been most memorable for them as they look back over their own lifetime, and then start seeing what that pattern is and connecting the dots. Why were these moments particularly important? What themes start to come up for you? In each of the applicants, you have made decisions in your life, where you wanted to go to school, what you want to study, how you're spending your time outside of class. What's behind those choices? And that should also, if you start looking for those patterns, give you some insights into what I would even call it your unconscious sometimes is driving you towards, and you're trying to get in touch with that. So this would be two good exercises.
Okay. Wow. Appreciate that. Now I'm excited to think about this a little bit. I think it really
It's never
is
too
helpful.
late, Graham.
I could get a second MBA. Yeah, but no, but
Yeah.
I think that, it's good to have these two very concrete exercises that people could engage in. It's almost like taking a personal inventory and coming up with those big life moments. And that might those might be the breadcrumbs that lead them to,
Exactly.
to what they want to write about. Terrific. So thanks for shedding light there. What we're going to do now is we have about 15 minutes left, and I don't even think it's going to take us that long to do this, but we like to have some kind of quick questions, and we're going to stay with Kirsten for this first one. And this is just tell us about something on your campus, or it could just be in Palo Alto, that you think every MBA student should do or visit before they graduate from your program.
Oh, that's a great question. Amazing. One of the things, especially during COVID times, there's a place right next to our campus. We call it the Stanford Dish, and it's a hike that you can do anywhere from 4 to 6 miles up kind of through the hills. And one of the things that we hear from our students all the time is, especially early in their tenure, rather than going to the big parties, and there are many, but going on walks with one other student, and they pair up as classmates to really spend at least an hour out in nature learning about someone else in your class. I think that's a great thing to do. Excellent.
All right, so Lauren, how about you? Anything that somebody must do either on campus or in New York City, I guess in your case, before they finish up at Stern?
I feel like there's so many things, but one of my favorites would have to be walking the Brooklyn Bridge. But most people walk from Manhattan to Brooklyn, but I would walk from Brooklyn to Manhattan so you can see the Manhattan skyline as you're walking in that direction. Make sure you get pizza or ice cream on either side before or after your walk.
Excellent. I have done that, and it is a really phenomenal view. So that's great advice.
I have a special place for Brooklyn in my heart.
How about David? What about across the Atlantic? We're in London now. What does somebody need to do before they graduate from LBS?
So I'm going to pick a London answer rather than LBS answer. I think just a favourite spot. I think to be in the heart of London is to walk down by the river, down by the Thames, across the Millennium Footbridge, and go to the Tate Modern Gallery, perhaps. So quite touristy, not very businessy. I'll probably get told off for that, but that I think is iconic London.
Yeah, and actually, the museum that David's talking about is, now I'm going to maybe get this wrong, but it's was built inside an old power plant, I think, or some kind of large factory. It's a really stunning space. So that's really cool advice. Excellent. Virginie, something that people need to do before they graduate from INSEAD, and I'll let you pick whichever campus you want, since I know you guys are
Thank you.
have a very global footprint.
Well, if I were to go with the French campus, I would go with the wine and pay visit to Burgundy, right? Or Bordeaux, or yes, so anything related to wine. But indeed, I would say take advantage of the three campuses and be in Abu Dhabi and Singapore, France, if you want. And even if it's for just graduation, that's a great opportunity to be on different continents.
Excellent. And I'm just going to add, just for our audience's kind of context, it is kind of happy hour right now where Virginie is, so that might be why wine is on the mind. How about you, Donna? What about something that people need to do in Chicago or at Booth before they graduate?
I would say do the architectural boat tour on the Chicago River. It's something that Chicagoans enjoy, tourists enjoy, and it's a nice little boat ride.
Got it. And I thought you were going to say go to a game at Wrigley, because we talked about that the other day too.
Yes.
Yeah, well, both are excellent. Terrific. All right, let's stay with you, Donna, for our next lightning round question, which is, I just want one piece of non-essay advice for people interested in applying to Booth. I know we spent the whole session talking about essays, so just a piece of general advice or something specific about another portion of the application process.
I always like to tell people to make sure they answer all the questions. Don't leave anything blank, because some people do.
Great advice. Yeah, this is a recurring theme, I feel like. And I think something that happens might be that candidates, they spend a lot of time in the essays, they get the recommenders off to the races, and they leave the data forms a bit for the end, which can have disastrous results if they leave stuff blank or don't get to everything. So great advice. Virginie, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice.
I think that's the interviews with the alumni, where people really need to do their due diligence before meeting alumni. They are volunteer for us. They volunteer their time. They are not asked to check anything or control or spy, or it's really more of a conversation and getting to know the applicant even more than through the application form and the videos. So it's really, people should really pay attention and do their due diligence on this, on the interviews with alumni.
And I just want to clarify, there are two, right? So if someone is
Correct.
invited to interview, they do two interviews with two different alums. And are those
different
alumni,
times.
are they
Correct.
picked in relationship to the candidate's goals or anything, or it's just like,
Yes
is
and
there,
no.
yeah, yes and no.
So
Okay.
one person will have a similar background and the other one will be totally different. Again, to be able to give a chance to the person to express their everything they do and showcase their work experience as well as personal in the context. So with somebody who knows well the same context or the same country or the same sector, and somebody who has no idea and is
Okay.
totally different. So
Okay.
that's the idea.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. David, one piece of non-essay advice.
So just some overall advice. Relax, tell your story honestly. Don't overdo it. Don't go over the top with what you're telling us. Don't try and squeeze everything you can think of into it. Be confident with a fairly summarized, basic picture of yourself that you're telling us.
Okay, terrific. Lauren, how about you? One non-essay tip here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's similar to what David said, but I think it's very important to make sure that you're telling your story, that you're telling it in a genuine way, whatever your story may be. We want to know what you have done. We want to know where your goals are, where you want to get, and you need to connect those dots for us. So how are you going to get there? And how do you see an MBA or, specifically an MBA at Stern helping you get there?
Okay, excellent. Kirsten, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about the application piece. Two small nuggets. One of the things that I've been seeing recently is when we ask for all your activities, for some reason, folks don't go back to their college and they just are listing post-college, and I'll look and they've done some amazing things, but you'll find out about it when you look at the resume, you might not catch it. So really think through holistically all of the time since college and post. And then the second, we didn't talk about this in the essays, Graham, we do have these optional questions. And I want to be really clear, when we ask for what matters most and why, that's a very projective one. So is your aspirations. We do also want to know about your achievements and why they're meaningful and what impact you've had. So as you're writing your essays, if those aren't coming up, great. We have this other real estate. If you've put your achievements into that essay, maybe you're using that essay for other schools too. So it's a dual purpose and you think you've covered it, awesome. You honestly do not have to write in the optional. But if I get to the end and see like, what really in their own words have they accomplished? It's not there, then I think that would be a miss.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful because I know I'd had a question about those optional kind of short answer type things that are in the data form or the application form. So thanks for shedding light on that. We're going to stay with you. We're just about wrapping up here. And I wanted to mention for our attendees that we have each school is going to jump into their own breakout room. We will get you the link shortly, but we're actually going to let our panelists jump off in a few moments here so they can get set up, and you'll stay with me just for a couple minutes. But our last question is just sort of a fun one, and it's in honor of NYU Stern's Pick 6 essay, which, you know, if everyone was paying close attention, you know, you have to pick out 6 images or drawings or things that you would use to describe yourself or introduce yourself to your classmates. So Kirsten, you're on the spot. If you had to pick one image for this exercise, can you think of something you would use?
Yes, I recently was leading a leadership workshop and we had everyone create a montage of images. So one that really spoke to me, it was about our own journey, it was a simple photograph of a woman at the beach. And what was important about that was she just looked so comfortable in her own skin. So I think that's what this point in my life where I'm trying to be is really, it's not about how others perceive you, but just being so happy in your own self.
Cool. All right. Excellent. All right. So, Lauren, this is kind of unfair because this is your school's topic and you guys did it as a team. But what was one of the images that you selected when you had to do this with your colleagues?
I know the pressure is on. So obviously I've given this so much thought because I look at so many Pick 6s, and like I said, we've done this as a team. And even since then, I've changed my mind about what I would put in there. And so if you ask me this today, my answer is a picture of my kids. I have 2 young kids and I have to include them, but not that like perfect Instagram worthy photo. It would have to be the reality of day-to-day life with young kids. So something that puts a fun spin on them.
So like maybe a picture of them running up behind you while you're on one of these types of conference calls, you know.
Correct. I was actually worried one of them was going to pop in a little bit earlier. So.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thanks for sharing that. David, what about you? Is there a picture that you might include if you had to do this exercise?
So I'm not applying for an MBA, so I don't have to do something that will impress you with my suitability for business school. So I'm going to make it personal. You know the things I like, Graham, in terms of music. So I'd pick a photo of a gig, music concert that included the band on stage and images of the crowd having a great time, because you know it just symbolizes lots of people being around, having fun, and my favorite thing, music. So pretty basic, but that's what would make me smile if I see an image of it.
Excellent. I can get behind that one. All right. So Delphine, how about you? What would your image be? Or one of them?
I will go with the image I have on my desktop, which is a pack of horses and in the forest, or in a countryside type of environment.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought you were going to talk about enjoying the forest of Fontainebleau when you were, going to give something people need to do before they graduate. So that makes a lot of sense.
But that will be missing the horse riding part of it. And
Yes. All right. And Donna, what about you? What would be one image that you would include?
Other than a picture of Wrigley Field, I think that will probably an old black and white picture of my grandparents' wedding from 1934.
Wow.
It was just 2 of them with her sister and brother-in-law, and just about all of how the thing started.
Got it. Excellent. That's a great idea. So what we're going to do now is I'd like to thank all of our panelists for making time to join us today. I've learned a lot about their essay questions, and I'm sure that everyone joining us has. We are going to let them leave and get into their individual breakout rooms. And then we're going to share links for those of you attending to each of those rooms so you can jump off and join them. But we're going to give them like a 2-minute head start just so they can get into their rooms. But I did want to sincerely thank Kirsten, Lauren, David, Virginie, and Donna for making time. It's always a pleasure to connect with all of you. And I just, can't thank you enough for making time while you could be reading applications. So please accept my sincere thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to let them jump off. And while they're doing that, I just was going to share a couple of tips, because again, we just want to make sure that everyone has a moment to get into their rooms before you all show up with your questions. Again, you're going to get links to those breakout rooms in a couple of ways. We'll share them in the chat here, and we're also going to email them to you. And the reason that's important is that if you want to go from one room to another, you're going to have to leave, this event to get there. So make sure that you copy paste or check your email if you want the links so that you could go and ask one school a question and then bounce into another room if that's what you want to do. But again, while they're preparing their breakout rooms, I just wanted to talk about, most schools are doing interviewing via video still, and that's probably going to be par for the course across the board this admission season. And so because of that, I wanted to just offer some advice on video interviewing. For those of you who joined us at our last session last week, we talked a little bit about this, but this is sort of a different set of tips. And I just wanted to mention that, you should wear what you would to an in-person interview from head to toe. And the reason I say head to toe is because you never know if you're going to have to get up, if there's someone knocking at your door. And so don't be caught wearing shorts and a dress shirt or something if you have to get up and go do something. So dress the part. The second thing is, and this one's a little weird and not so easy, is make eye contact with the camera, not so much with your screen. Now, in some cases, your webcam is perfectly positioned. And so when you're looking at the screen, all is good. But there are computers where the webcam is a little bit off center or it's down below. And so you don't want to give your interviewer a kind of nostril shot if your camera's down below. You're like, you've got to make sure that you're engaging with the camera. And that can be difficult because it means looking at the lens of the camera and not necessarily looking directly at the image on screen of your interviewer. But it goes a long way because they'll feel like you're really engaging with them. So make sure you take care of that. And then the last thing I would do is, just make sure you're aware of what schools are asking in their interviews. And ClearMed actually has an archive with thousands and thousands of sample questions. And I wouldn't even call them sample questions, they're real questions because we have this interview report archive. It's free. You literally can sort by school. You can go in and literally read reports from real candidates who've gone and interviewed at schools. It's a service that we've put in place to help you all as you navigate this process. Again, it's totally free. You just go on our website and you can look up like what does INSEAD ask at their interviews or any of these programs that have joined us today. There are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of reports for these schools. So you can read those and I would practice. And I should mention as well, shameless plug, we also have interview guides that you can buy on our website. They're $20. It's actually a really good investment if you get an interview at a school because those guides will not only tell you what questions the schools most often ask, but we also give advice on how to respond to those questions and how you might want to frame your answers. We talk about a lot of other things in the guides too, in terms of how the interview is weighted in a given school's process, et cetera. So lots of good stuff in there. You can find those on our website. I did want to thank everyone for joining us today. It means a lot to all of us to see you all here. I know this is the third week in a row that we've done these. We've had some amazing schools for this fall set of sessions, and I really appreciate everyone making time. We're going to share those links with you now so you can jump off and join the schools and ask your questions. And again, don't hesitate to go to more than one. You can bounce from one to another. And yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Really appreciate it. And best of luck as you journey through the MBA admissions process.